This video is going to be a basic introduction into Graphene in terms of Graphene's overall hierarchical structure and permission structure, and then a really basic introduction into the user interface and how some of this stuff works initially. So just out of the box, I've got an image here, an orange box that shows Graphene, and Graphene being the application. But really, Graphene doesn't really do much of anything unless a site has been defined. And so as part of the initialization workflow or initialization wizard that comes with Graphene, one of the first things it's going to do is make you build a site. And so I've got here as an example Binghamton University's my.binghamton.edu Graphene site. And also as part of that initial workflow, that initial setup process, is it's going to assign one initial member of that site. And really it's going to create a site admin as well. But the notion here is that Graphene will, out of the box, build you a site and build you, associate any necessary, or at least the initial membership associated with that site. But I do want to point out that it is actually totally possible with Graphene to set up multiple concurrent sites under a single instance of the application. So you don't necessarily have to stand up multiple copies of Graphene to hold multiple different sites if you don't want to. Now, I'm not necessarily saying that that's the only way to do it or necessarily that's even the best way to do it, but it is totally possible. And then furthermore, since we actually have these multiple different sites under the same Graphene instantiation, we can actually have different memberships associated with those different sites, and you could actually theoretically have an individual member who's a member of multiple different sites within Graphene. So you can make it as complicated as you want to, but generally that's just something that's available and it's part of the structure, which is important to understand. But going forward, at least as far as this tutorial is concerned, we're really just going to focus on a single Graphene instance with a single site, namely the my.binghamton.edu website, and at least initially here we're going to have two members associated with that particular site. So if you really want to do anything interesting with Graphene, you kind of need to build groups. And groups they serve multiple purposes, but they're really, at their most basic form, just a population of people who have some common connectivity. And it's a way of completely sandboxing all of the roles and permissions and everything within that one grouping. So for example, I've got two members of my site. I've got Tim Cortese and Jane Doe. And what I've done is I've created two different groups within that site. And I've said that Tim Cortese is a member of the faculty group and Jane Doe is a member of the students group. Now, there's really nothing here preventing me from having Tim Cortese also be a member of the students group or vice versa. But for the sake of this demonstration, we have two groups, we have two members, and each member is a member of one of those two groups. But again, just having groups doesn't really do much for me. So what I'm going to do here next is I'm going to create some pages within those groups. And so under the faculty group, we've created a page called homepage. Under the students group, we've also created a page called homepage, but we've also created a group called a page rather called Campus Life. And so now when an individual logs in, let's say Tim Cortese logs into my Binghamton, it's going to look up their group memberships and it's going to look up their page memberships and it's going to say, okay, Tim Cortese is a member of the faculty group. There's one page called homepage, and we're going to drop you right into that homepage. Similarly, when Jane Doe logs into my Binghamton, it's going to see that Jane is a member of the student group, and it's going to drop Jane directly into the homepage, and then also give a menu structure which would allow Jane to navigate to the Campus Life page. Now, the way we have it set up here, each one of these people only is a member of one individual group, so that's all they're going to see, but they will see the groups and the pages that they have access to. So let's say, though, we wanted to put some content on those pages. And in its most basic form, we have a thing called the content widget, which is really nothing more than a way of either putting text or HTML on the page. It's not dynamic text or HTML. It's really just static content, static text, or statically defined HTML that goes on the page. And that can be nice if you just have a simple message that you want to put up there or something really basic. And so that's probably the easiest way to add content to any particular page. The next easiest thing you can do is you can put an image on a page. But you'll notice here that I've got the image of the cat on the page, but I've also got this image over here associated with the group. And what's going on here is that in order to make an image be visible to a particular population of people within Graphene, you have to upload that image to that particular group. And this is going to be a common theme going forward, that everything is really, really very tightly tied to these groups. Everything to do with permissions is tied to those groups. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to upload the image of a cat to the faculty group. And once it's been uploaded, then I'm going to be able to add it to the page. I can't add it to the page really until it's been uploaded to the group. And the nice thing about this though is, let's say Jane Doe logs into My Binghamton and Jane knows the URL of that particular image. In this particular case, because Jane is not a member of the faculty group, even knowing the URL is insufficient. Jane would actually have to be a member of the faculty group in order to see that image. So it's really kind of a two-step process. You're uploading the image to the group, and that grants everyone permissions to see it, and then you're secondarily putting that image on the page. And if you wanted to put that same image on the student page, you would actually have to go through the process of uploading that image to the student group as well, and then you could do it there in addition to that. So it's very tied to permissions. It's enforcing this, and this is a common theme which is going to make sure that My Binghamton, or really specifically Graphene, is able to prevent people from doing things they shouldn't be doing really at the most basic level. So let's add a link, right? You'll notice that very much like the image of the cat, we're actually defining this link to Blackboard at the group level again. So we create a link to Blackboard in the faculty group. We create a link to the Blackboard in the student group. And once we define that link, we can do something that's a little bit different than what we did with the images here, is we can actually define, we can add to the home page of each of these two groups a thing called a link collection. And this is actually going to aggregate all of the links associated with, optionally, just that group, or it can actually look at all of the links that a particular individual who's currently logged into Graphene has permissions to. So, for example, if Tim Cortese was a member of multiple different groups, it would potentially, optionally, allow that link collection to show all of the different images associated with all of the groups that they're a member of. Alternatively, you can have it just show the links associated with that particular group. But regardless, the links are tied to the group first, and then we add them to the page as a secondary step. So now we're getting into these micro applications, and this is really where the power of Graphene lies. This is where it starts to set itself aside, or a little bit ahead from a lot of the other micro application, or rather, a lot of the other portal platforms out there. And so you'll notice that I've got 5 different micro applications, and they're not tied to any group at this point. They're actually just defined at the highest level associated with that site. So we have a laundry app, a bus tracking app, a faculty reporting app, daily photo app, and an orientation application. And the only people who can actually see any of these applications are developers of those particular applications. And there's a whole secondary level permissions for managing site developers and application developers, which I won't get into. But these are just the applications defined at the highest level within the site. And so if you wanted to instantiate one of these applications in a particular group, there's an additional process that you have to do in order to do that. So we take an application and we actually go through the process of creating an app instance. So if we want to have faculty reporting be on the faculty group, we actually instantiate a copy of that application. And I say copy, but that's really the wrong terminology. It's actually an instance. It's a link to that application. And that actually has a whole bunch of additional benefits to us in terms of things like version control, because in each one of these micro applications, we can actually have multiple different versions of the application, and the instance is actually what's binding that particular version of the application to that particular group. So you can continue to work on these applications without impacting your end users who actually are running a particular instance of that application. And then furthermore, you can actually take it one step further, and you can say over here on this student group, we've got 3 different instances of 3 different applications, but let's say we want to actually put those on a particular page. Well, we can do that as well. So you'll notice though that we kind of had a 3-step process here. First, we created the application, then we instantiated the application within that group, and that's what really defines those permissions and allows us to do version control in a meaningful way. And then if you want to add it to a page as a secondary or tertiary option, you can do so at that time. And there's really one more step here that I'll just briefly go into, although that's really something for a later date. But associated with applications, applications really need to be able to get their data from somewhere. Some of these applications here, like the bus tracking application, the data source is actually a public JSON feed. It's a public asset. So there's really no special permissions required for that. But for the faculty reporting application, for example, that's something that there are very specific permissions that are required to talk to an external RESTful API or an external database. And we don't want to allow those permissions to be globally accessible throughout all of Graphene. So part of the process of instantiating these applications in a group is to create these endpoints, again, associated with the group, and that's going to have all of the information about how that app instance is going to connect to the RESTful API or that RESTful service, and then any additional permissions that are required associated with that particular endpoint. So just to refresh, we have Graphene. It can have a site, or it can have one or more sites, really. Those sites have members associated with them, and administrators and developers. And then each site can have one or more groups, so you might have any number of different groups. Those groups can have any number of different pages in there, and then we can have additional things like links and images and app instances and other content that can either just be part of that group, or they can optionally be added to a particular page so that they're visible to end users who are looking at this. So that's really it. I mean, there's actually a lot more going on. There's a thing called tags and some other stuff that we can do. As I mentioned before, there's this notion of composite groups that allow you to have groups that are combined of other groups. But this is kind of notionally the highest level, most basic instantiation of Graphene and all of the hierarchy and permissions associated with it. So let's take a look at what this actually looks like within an instance of Graphene. So I've got a relatively vanilla instance of Graphene here as it was stood up based on just, we ran the installer. And you'll notice here that I have one group, it's called default. That one group has one page called welcome, and that one page has one content widget on it that just has some information right here. And if we wanted to, we could go in and we could modify this content. So I actually just click that edit button here. We'll click on the pencil, and we can say, Tim was here, and something like that. And this is a WYSIWYG editor, so we can do things like making it bold, and we can highlight color and stuff like that. Relatively straightforward. That looks ugly, but you can do that kind of stuff. You can also drag these content widgets around on the page. We can lay out the page differently depending on how we might want to do that. We've currently got a 3-column layout here. We could do a 1-column layout, or various different options. But that's pretty much content at its most basic level. If we wanted to add another piece of content on here, we could do that. So we're going to say, this time instead of the WYSIWYG editor, we're going to do an HTML editor. We'll leave the title as it is. And I'm going to put it inside of a container, display the title bar, and yeah, we'll allow it to be minimized. Okay, so there's that. And let's actually say I want to move this over here. So let's edit this again, and we're going to drag this and put it over here. You'll notice, so this time when I click edit, that there's no WYSIWYG editor. So I can actually type just regular old HTML in here. So I'm going to use some standard Bootstrap classes. We'll do a div class equals alert success. And we'll just say, here is a message. Welcome to Graphene. Oops. We'll put a break in there. Okay, so we'll save that. And so yeah, the fact that it's green here is just because I'm using standard Bootstrap classes. And yeah, we can move that around if we want to, but we'll leave it over here. Okay, so I mentioned images before. So let's go ahead and add an image to this page. So I'm going to click on my name up here and take me to admin. And the reason I can go into admin is because I'm an administrator of either the whole site or this particular group. And in my case, I'm actually an administrator of both. And if I click on groups here, you'll notice that I really only have one group. And you'll notice here, if I click on members, yep, I'm a member of that group. And if I click on admins, I'm an administrator of that group. So let's dive into this group and let's look at images. All right, so before I uploaded an image of a dinosaur here, and I've got my image of a dinosaur. And so if I wanted to add that dinosaur to the page, I can go back and I can do that. So let's go back to test, And you'll notice though that even though the dinosaur, we uploaded this image of a dinosaur before, but it's not really visible anywhere. Not until we actually go back into here and we add it. So let's click Edit, and let's do an image widget, and let's select our dinosaur, and we'll do an alt text dinosaur, and save that there. Yeah, we'll leave the dinosaur over here. Okay, so now we've got two basic content widgets, and we've got an image of a dinosaur. And now this URL associated with this dinosaur, as I mentioned before, is not actually visible to anybody who's not in this default group. So only people in this default group are going to have the permissions to see it, and then they, of course, will only see it because we actually added it to the page. So we've got an image here. Now let's see if we can add some links. So if we go into groups here, and you'll notice that we don't actually have any links right now. So I'm going to add a link, and I'm going to do, let's see, we'll do Google. /www.google.com. And we'll do another one, we'll do YouTube. YouTube, https://youtube.com, and save that. And so if we hop back over to our page here, you'll notice again, the links haven't actually showed up yet because we haven't told the page how to render any of this information. But if I click here again on Edit, and I say Widgets, and we click Links, I can say, I want to have my links widget. And so this is actually going to do a collection of all of the different widgets, or rather all of the different links that are associated with that group. Optionally, if I check this box here, in addition to showing all the links associated with this group, it'll actually show me all of the links for all of the groups that I'm a member of on Graphene. I'm not going to check that box for now because I just want to do links associated with this particular group. So we'll say Save and Done. And you'll notice here that we have google.com and YouTube. Those are the two links that I created. And let's play around with the layout here. Click Edit again. I'm going to move my dinosaur down here. And yeah, we'll put that right there. Okay, so this is a link to google.com, and this is a link to youtube.com. And we can actually favorite these things if we want to. So you know, if somebody clicks the star next to it, they can mark it as their favorite. They can filter on it, so we can say, you know, if you've got a big long list in here, you could do a search for YouTube or whatever. But that's a basic link collection. And again, that's pulling from the groups that we have over here. So we talked about pages, we talked about images, and we talked about links. We haven't yet talked about app instances or endpoints yet. Those were things that I talked about before with those micro applications. I'm not going to get too much into detail with that right now. And we've also got this notion of tags and composites, which I'm not going to cover at the moment. But let's create another group here. And so we'll create a group called Students. All right, and I'm going to make myself a member of the student group. Okay. So now when I hop back to my home page here, you'll notice that we've got the default group here. It has the one page called Welcome. And if I go to the student group, it's up here at the top, but if I were to click on it, it's actually going to take me to nothing because the student group doesn't have any pages associated with it just yet. So let's go in and actually create a page for the student group. We'll go to Groups, we'll go to Students, and we're going to create a blank page. So this will just be called Home Page, and we'll make it capital. All right, and I'm just going to click on it here. That's going to be a shortcut that takes me there. But here we go. So this is the default page with my dinosaur, and we have the students over here, and they have their home page. You'll notice though that I'm not an administrator of this particular page, so I didn't get my edit button. Whereas over here, I do have an edit button up in the top right-hand corner. So let's make me an administrator of the student group. So let's go into Students and click on Admins, and we'll add me here. All right, so now if I go back to my test page, and there we go. So now I have my big old edit button right here, and I can, let's say I can do a new content widget, and we'll do the WYSIWYG editor again. And I'm going to drag this over to the middle, and yeah, we'll put it in a container. Yeah, we don't need the title bar though. Okay, and I'll put some text here. So Tim was here. Welcome to the student page. All right, there we go. So now I've got two groups. Each group has one page, and there's some basic content, images, and links and stuff associated with those pages. So that's really it in the most basic form. I'll probably do a follow-up video where we talk a little bit more about micro applications and app instances and endpoints and things like that. But for the sake of this particular introduction, that's really about it. So again, just to go over this one more time, we have Graphene. Graphene can have multiple sites, and actually I'll show you that really quick. If I go into the admin again, you'll notice that there's actually a list of sites here. For this particular case, we only have one individual site with Graphene, and it's actually using this one particular URL here. And then that particular site has any number of groups, and then those groups can have any number of different pages in there, right? And so that's what we've got showing right here. All right, well, that's pretty much it. Thanks.